Mastering modal verbs, must, should, and ought to. Hello everyone. Welcome back to our English language learning journey. Today, we'll dive into an exciting part of the English language that can sometimes be tricky but is incredibly useful once you get the hang of it. Modal verbs for obligation. These are words like must, should, and ought to that we use to talk about things we need or don't need to do. When we talk about obligations, we're talking about things that we think are necessary, things we should do, or rules we have to follow. In English, there are three main modal verbs we use to express obligation: must, should, and ought to. Must expresses a strong obligation, something that is necessary. It's like a rule or law. For example, you must stop at a red light. Should and ought to are used to give advice or say what we think is the best thing to do, but without such strong obligation. For example, you should eat healthy food, or you ought to exercise regularly. Must is used to express something that is necessary or very important. It can also express certainty or deduction. When we say, "I must do my homework," it means it is necessary for me to do my homework. Note that must is not normally used in the negative to express lack of necessity. We usually use do not need to for that. Both should and ought to are used to talk about advice, recommendations, or expectations. They're not as strong as must, and they allow more freedom. For example, you should read more books, or you ought to call your mother. Remember that ought to is a bit more formal and less commonly used than should, especially in American English. Now let's focus on common mistakes. One common mistake is using must not to talk about lack of necessity. Remember, must not means prohibition, not lack of necessity. So, you must not touch the painting means it's prohibited to touch the painting, not that it's unnecessary. Another confusion can occur with should and ought to. They are almost interchangeable, but note that ought to is less used in negative forms and questions. That's all for today's lesson on modal verbs for obligation. Remember, these words are your friends. Must, should, and ought to. Use them to express obligations, give advice, and make recommendations. I hope this video was helpful and that you're feeling more confident about your understanding of these modal verbs. Keep practicing, and soon enough, it'll be second nature to you. Thanks for joining us today, and remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Keep going, and you'll get there. Until next time, happy learning!